Sitting at 2-1 after a Week 3 win against the New England Patriots, the Jets get ready to take on the Denver Broncos this Saturday at home. We're here to discuss it. Myself, Dylan Turman, no Chris Schubert today. Dylan, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I mean, we told Chris this is a fireable offense. He'll have a statement shortly or next week coming. But yeah, two of us here today. Also, 2 wins for the Jets. And not to say this was expected when you looked at the schedule, but it feels good that you're on par with your predictions so far through 3 games.
Yeah, and the funny thing, Dylan, about, and I think you've probably heard it too, a lot of Jets fans noticed that leading up to this game, there was a lot of talk about how, the Patriots had surprised the Bengals and they were a better team than we thought. And, even I think most people picked the Jets. But there was a lot of sort of, don't underestimate this Patriots defense. They're going to keep it close. They're going to make it life tough on the Jets. So it won't be an easy win. It turned out to be an easy win. I can't remember the last time I watched one drive and was just like, they're winning this game. Like, I have zero doubt. And they punted. On that first drive, they punted, but they spread the ball around. They were dominant. I was like, they're going to win this game. But still, there were when it was all said and done, the narrative switched from, well, the Patriots have a really good defense. They're going to keep it close. Then it became, well, the Patriots are really terrible. So this isn't really anything for the Jets fans to get excited about.
Yeah. The goalposts are always going to move, and someone's always going to try to minimize any Jets win at this point. Even if they win the Super Bowl, they're going to try to say, it was a down year for passing. So, of course, Aaron Rodgers could light up the league, whatever. They're always going to try to minimize it. So it was kind of annoying to see everybody like in the national media when they're talking about analyzing this game. Pre-game, it was always, this is going to be a close game, run game, defense, all the things we harped on last week. And then when it comes out and the Jets, like you said, after one drive, and for me, it was after one defensive drive, I saw that first third down, that 3 and out against Jacoby Brissett, and I was like, okay, maybe Jacoby doesn't have a chance against us. And historically, in the past couple of seasons, he's diced us up. So, of course, somebody's going to move the goalpost, but this was quite an easy win. 24-3 doesn't even come close to what it actually should have been. Probably
it
38-3.
It felt mid-30s. It was.
Yeah. We have our group chat. We talk a little bit during the games, and it was penalties, like stupid penalties in the beginning of the game on the first drive killed it. And it's like they could have went down and scored 3 drives to 3 touchdowns, to open the game. And that would have been 21-0 out the gates. And I was looking at the win probability, like on the play-by-play. And after we scored the first touchdown, we had like a high 80s or mid 80s% chance to win the game. So I was like, wow, they really they said that the Patriots were never going to come back. And it showed. We did different things. We can get into it offensively. I mean, the pass pros always look good. I think it looked the best it's been this week. Obviously, they lost a piece. Brees, I think he's a shining star in the pass pro. He was literally putting his body on the line to protect Aaron. Rodgers' decision-making, the quick decisions, getting the ball out quick, that's always going to help the offensive line, but that helps everybody on the offense, and it showed. He started 12 of 13, and the first 2 incompletions were, ticky-tack incompletions where the guy caught it and his foot was out of bounds with Garrett, and I think there was one on the back line where he just didn't come down with it or something, or the Mike Williams it was like a 55-yard uncorking passes on the run. Yeah, exactly. So that I liked. And then Tyler Conklin, I mean, his breakout was huge. It was much needed for this offense. Give somebody life around Garrett.
Yep.
Obviously, there's some negatives we can get into, but sticking with the positives, it was defensively the blitzing at the right times. That first third down, like I said, I felt like I just knew the game was going to be different and that it wasn't going to be, we're going to let them hang around type of game. No, Ulbrich wanted to show that he can still blitz. And I like that Saleh even said, he's like, we just had to remind people that we can send Quincy, we can send Michael Carter, we can send Tony Adams, whoever it is. And I really like that. I think their first pass rush set was Tack McKinley, Quinnen Williams, Will McDonald shading the tackle as a 4-eye. Shout out to the Iowa State days. And then Michael Clemens in a wide 9. So like Tack McKinley was out there for the first pass rush situation on 3rd and long. So that was really cool to see. McDonald's spin move on Quinnen's sack. Watching it on the All-22, I probably watched it 4 or 5 times right before we went live. His spin occupied the left tackle, left guard, or right guard, right tackle, and center on the play. And Quinnen was able to loop around, blow right past Ramondre for the sack. It was so nice. So little things on defense that they're finally showing that they didn't show the first 2 weeks, that maybe we weren't overreacting to, but we were saying that you start to get worried if this defense can't get home with 4 and they're not going to get, cute and try to bring pressure or blitzes with 5 or 6. But now they're starting to show it. Hopefully they do continue to show it against some of these teams coming up, because we're going to need it again. Bo Nix is a mobile quarterback, but that's not to say he can't stand in the pocket and deliver if he needs to. So the Jets really have to be disciplined again this week up front.
Yeah, I think it was good to see the Jets. I think the way I said it after the game, they did what they should have done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get too excited about of course New England's got a third round right tackle starting at left tackle and I get that nobody cares, and we talk about that, like, you're injured, put your guys out there, nobody cares,
Right?
But there's that part, but then there's also, well, we should not ignore it. The fact that they were playing a banged up unit, and they have a great trio of corners against the quarterback, who's a sort of below average quarterback. So this is what they should have done, and they took care of business. Which so on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, don't get too excited over it, but also it's nice to have them go out and do what they should do, because as I said before the game, how many times have we seen them face a team and we see the laundry list of injuries they have on the offensive line, the opponent that is, and the Jets still don't get to the quarterback. And you're like, what the hell is going on here? We're supposed to have this fearsome front, this dominant front, and they're facing 2-3 backups and 0 push. So yeah, okay, you got a bunch of sacks and it was against a bunch of backups. What do you want me to do? Like, they did what they supposed to do. I'm supposed to feel bad or it doesn't count? No, they did their jobs. And now they'll play a Denver team with, again, as you said, a mobile quarterback. And I saw a number today, Dylan. We'll get into the Denver preview in a minute, but Aaron Rodgers, I forget. I got to start writing down this stuff down because I feel bad when I don't give people credit. Oh, okay. It was Rich Cimini, I think. Listening to Rich Cimini's podcast, probably somebody else, said that Rodgers in his career on 9 days rest is 13-0 coming after on the mini bye. 13-0 for his career, and you're facing a rookie quarterback with this Jets secondary. I like the Jets' chances. Let's just start it off with that. But
yeah. And every interview Rodgers did, sorry to cut you off, he did mention the mini bye in every little media availability. He said, it's like, oh, yeah, we got a nice little long weekend coming up. I'm very happy. Yeah. So I'm not surprised that his stats are good. His primetime stats are good. And now his, long day rest or off a bye week stats, those are probably going to be good too. And those are the games, like Chris says, we'll speak for Chris. I know he's not here, but he always says
gotta win
the first game of the season and the games after a bye. And this counts as a little mini bye. You have to be prepared for this, and you have to beat the inferior teams on your schedule. And I know the Broncos are underrated. They are not getting looked at as they should. They have a better resume than the Patriots did. And the way that we talked about them, I feel like we need to talk a little bit nicer about the Broncos because their defense brings it. But you have to beat the inferior teams on your schedule. We're favored to win by almost a touchdown. So maybe that's not the final result, but that should be the expectation, is you should be winning this game by, a comfortable margin.
And it's interesting. All three, the big 3 rookie quarterbacks all looked much better in week 3 than weeks 1 and 2. The jump was kind of crazy to see all 3 guys. Bo Nix, though, his first couple drives, he was on fire. He looked like a different guy. And you start, sometimes when it clicks, it clicks. And look, that's not to say that's he's going to do every week for the rest of the year. But clearly already after just a couple of weeks performing at a higher level than he had before. So, yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be a cakewalk, but I mean, we don't even have to wait for picks. Like I've just said, Rodgers is 13-0, 13-0, coming off a bye. This Jets secondary, I do expect them to win this game, but I think there are a few games on the schedule, and look, we do the schedule when it comes out, but that so much is going to change from week to week in this league. Right. It's impossible to say, I think 4 months from now when they play this team in week 13, they're going to win. You have no idea who's going to be lined up. So, Rich mentions that adjustments were made by the coaching staff. I see you pop that up there, Dylan. Charles, how we doing, bud?
That's very important too, because that's a problem with this team.
Yeah, and part of me wonders if it's them just saying, you're facing a guy in Brissett, like you mentioned, he's had some success against the Jets, and he's not a great quarterback. Is it them saying, let's get after this guy, stop giving him time, and get home quicker? And then do you carry that on and say, you know what, we're facing a rookie. Let's try to rattle this kid and do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Because like they did with Jacoby Brissett, they fired up the blitz early. And this is something I feel like the Patriots did a lot to the Jets specifically when you watch these games, because we had younger, inexperienced or, below average quarterbacks. He dials up pressure first, gets the quarterbacks thinking, then shows pressure and then backs off. And then the quarterback is thinking, oh, wow, I have 7 guys in the picture that could be blitzing me. And now only 4 are coming, and I have to figure out where they're coming from. And that gets in the head of Jacoby Brissett or whoever it is. And that's what the Jets are going to have to continue to do. They can probably do it against Knicks, like you said. They can more than likely do it against Darnold, I would imagine. Obviously, Buffalo and Josh Allen, that's a different beast, and you have to, prepare a different way for Josh Allen. But the Jets kind of have that figured out, not saying they'll win, but and then you have Justin Fields with Pittsburgh. So, these are the quarterbacks that you have to do that too, and just kind of keep dialing it up, mixing it up, and showing different pressures, different looks. And hopefully Ulbrich keeps making these adjustments on the fly, and we'll get into the offensive adjustments too. But I like what we're seeing from this little new look defense in week 3.
Yeah, you mentioned the injury. Of course, that was to Morgan Moses, the right tackle,
Mm-hmm.
on a play where Tyron Smith got beat and his man rolled up into the back of Moses' leg, injured his knee, 2 to 4 weeks. I wouldn't be shocked if he plays in London. I would be shocked if he didn't play the following week. What is that? The Buffalo? That's Buffalo, right?
Yeah, Buffalo.
Denver. Yep. Yeah, Denver, London, Minnesota, and London, and then Buffalo. He's a tough dude, but he's an older guy. They said 2 to 4 weeks, and you got 17 days between the previous game, the day he got injured, and kickoff against Minnesota. So we'll see. They may leave him at home for the Minnesota game and go from there. But in his place, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you follow the Jordan Love timeline, and I know it's a quarterback versus an offensive tackle, and they do completely different things. It's just
a young quarterback.
It's an MCL sprain. Yes, it's just an MCL sprain at in a vacuum. He is suited up or supposed to be suiting up to start this week, which I believe is 23 days out from his injury. Right. So the fact that the Jets didn't put Moses on IR gives me hope, obviously, that Buffalo is in contention on that Monday night game, considering he does have that one extra day. Yeah. But they didn't put him on IR, so they don't feel like he's going to miss 4. So at worst, you get him back for Pittsburgh, and he misses the Buffalo game. But I do think it is important for the person that we're talking about that if it is 2 games, then it's 2 games. But 3, I feel like, is like the borderline stretch of how much I want to see of this rookie.
Yeah, so Fashanu will step in. Olu Fashanu stepped in for Moses the other day. Little conversation on the Jet Nation message boards. Some people seemed upset that his PFF pass blocking grade was low. He had 6 pass blocking reps, 6 or 8, whatever it was. Listen, I mean, if you have one play, they grade it, fine. But to me, when I watched the All-22, I don't know what you saw, Dylan. What jumped out at me was that, listen, it was a vintage Rodgers performance, right? Everybody said it. The ball was out immediately after the snap. So from this is just from my untrained amateur eye, all but 2 plays, the ball was out like instantly, second and a half. So Olu's not being asked to do much, right? Mm-hmm. Let the guy in front of you make contact. The ball's out by his 3rd step. There were 2 plays where he needed to give Rodgers a little bit of time. And on one, he, again, because the ball came out quickly enough, there was no harm, no foul, but he seemed to have a hard time keeping up with what the defensive end was doing in front of him. Faked inside, jumped outside, and Olu was kind of all over the place. And then another rep where he lost some ground pretty quickly before the ball was out. So again, I'm not going to sit here and criticize the guy over 2 bad reps on 6 plays. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I see people, he gave up no pressures, great game. And I'm like, well, as I explained to somebody, if your tackle gets put on skates and driven back in the pocket, but you got Aaron Rodgers, so he just flicks his wrist and gets off a quick slant and completes the pass, is that a good rep from the lineman? Like, no, it's not. So too small of a sample size to get worked up one way or the other. What are your expectations? I don't love the fact that it's an out of position thing. Like, if this was week 8, 9, 10, 11, and we could say, well, maybe he's had a bunch of reps on the right side during the season, I'd feel a lot better about it. But at this point, a couple weeks of practice on the right side, probably not. I mean, they're fortunate in that, and this is something we don't know, Dylan, right? We talked about when they signed Moses and drafted Fashanu, when Moses sits, Fashanu will practice. But I would imagine that's been on the left side. We don't know that. They could be working him on the right. So we don't know how much work he's been getting on the right, but basically taking a rookie left tackle, putting him on the right side against a pretty good front. So what are your expectations? Do you have any concerns?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we don't know in practice what the split is, if there even is a split of left tackle, right tackle for Fashanu. You'd have to assume that if Tyron came out, he would go in, or if Moses came out, that he would go in first up. But that doesn't mean to say that he's even splitting that 50-50. So we know that he got right tackle reps in training camp, toward the end of training camp at least. And maybe, yeah, that is a couple weeks, but we don't know if that has continued to the fullest extent that it should.
Exactly.
So it does make me a little nervous. But with that said, I mean, six snaps is a very, very small sample size. And that play, the one play you're describing, I remember it did not look good. And that's going to happen. Maybe he was just a little excited, like he was thrust into the game. I think that goes into it.
Now he's going to have a full week of first team reps on the right side.
He knows he's the guy. He and AVT can get on the same page. But I feel like, it's just too small of a sample size to say one way or another. And I know that nobody likes to wait before putting a label on a guy of, he can't do this or can do this. But when you hear Rodgers talk about him being consistent at practice and not really, making the same mistake twice, that makes me a little bit excited. So my expectation is we're going to hear them talk about him when they talk about Morgan Moses' injury in the beginning of the game, when they're introducing the team. And then after that, we might hear him once or twice throughout the game because he let up like a pressure or maybe even a sack. I don't expect it to be a 5 sacks allowed type of day, although Broncos defensive line has some dogs on it. Let's be honest, including one of our own former guys. And I think it's going to be a good test for him. Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. Wild Wave, how we doing in the chat there? The real CB3 says playing Josh Allen twice a year helps them against these guys, types of quarterbacks you mentioned, Dylan, which, anytime you have to, and really that's just the league now. It used to be a bonus if your quarterback could run. Now it's like, how do you have a quarterback who can't run? Everybody runs. You know what I mean?
Right.
With the exception of a couple of guys, even 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, isn't, he's not going to break off a 70-yarder, but he can still hurt you if you blitz and you miss. And, if the DBs have their backs turned in man coverage, he's going to pick up 6 yards and get a first down. So he's, again, he's not the electric runner that a lot of these young guys are. But I watched Nick's last week and watched him run. Knew he could from watching him in college. Real CB also says Nix is a rookie. He'll have growing pains. Absolutely. No, he's talking about Olu. Sorry, for Olu to let Conklin chip. I would imagine they'll give him help there on that side, especially if he struggles. And AVT's been much better. I don't think he was great in week 1, but he's been better since then. And yes, Rich, he did play on the right side in the preseason. One game, like 12, 14 snaps, not a ton. So not a ton of experience. And of course, preseason it's going to be against lower level talent. So it's gonna be interesting. My info, I don't know if that's a rumor. My info, I think Schefter or Rappaport, one of them just kind of put that out in the ether and said, if I'm Miami, here are a few quarterbacks I would look at. And one of them was Zach Wilson, current Broncos quarterback, unlikely to see the field this week. And we'll talk about that Dolphin situation later on, Dylan. I find that whole situation very interesting. So, I don't expect perfection. I expect him to be a rookie left tackle playing out of position against some good pass rushers, and he might get beat a little bit. But listen, if he pitches a shutout, he's not going to the Hall of Fame. And if he gives up a couple of sacks, he's not getting cut. I
was just going to say, one game isn't going to, be the end all be all for Olu, like whatsoever. And I really think that this is, and I'll pitch this question to you. If Olu plays up to expectation, maybe even slightly above expectation for, let's say he only misses 2 games, Morgan, and he comes back he's ready for Buffalo Monday night. Do you immediately go back to Morgan Moses? Or, well, I guess I would ask you to get in the head of Robert Saleh. And would you be willing to put Morgan Moses back in, or would you stick with Fashanu and keep it rolling there?
It's a great question because I had that same thought. I think anything short of dominating. I think if he's good, then they go back to Moses. And,
Hmm.
because the respect they have for Moses, again, Moses is another guy. I think week 1 wasn't great for him, but since then he'd been better. I think he was having a good game before he got hurt the other day. So
Hmm.
I think given his veteran status, if there's not a huge disparity in play, if Fashanu goes out there, even, if game 1 is okay and game 2 he's dominating, they might say, you know what, maybe we stick with. But I don't see that happening, so I think they do go back to Moses.
Hmm.
But it'd be a nice problem to have. It'd be nice to,
Yes.
for the Jets to have to sit there and say, we have 2 really good guys. Who do we go with?
Yeah,
We'll
came a long way from debating whether they're going to put you or I at left tackle, and now they have, the potential to have 3 very viable options at tackle. It's a good thing.
yeah, actual football players.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the to doing some key matchups in that game. Nothing to do with last week's game, nothing to do with this week's game. Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show
Hmm.
waded into the waters, the Hassan Reddick holdout waters, and made some comments. And I don't know that he cleared it up yesterday either. I thought the media or today, whenever he met with the press, I thought they would ask him about it. It doesn't seem they did, or if they did, I listened to the presser, I didn't catch it. But he basically was asked about that story trashing him and the Jets a couple weeks ago. And he said it sounded like something that was written by Hassan Reddick's agent. And then he said, well, former agent, maybe we'll see something along those lines. At
Hmm.
first, I took that to mean, did he just say Reddick agent is now going to be his former agent? Like, is he firing the guy? But then when I listened back, I thought that could be him saying his actual former agent, because he didn't say, he said it sounded like it was written by.
Right.
So I'm like, does Reddick have a former agent? And he's like, just cracking a joke.
Hmm.
Whether it's a joke or not, this is just my 2 cents. I don't think players should comment on other players' holdouts. I think you let that dude handle his business and you handle yours. The only time I ever remember this happening was with Brett Favre in Green Bay when he said, what was it, Dryer? I forget which one of the receivers, a Green Bay receiver, uh, said he needs to get into camp. We're all here working. Receiver came into camp and blew his knee out before he got his new deal. And everybody's like, is Brett Favre going to pay him now? You're going to take care of him? Like,
Hmm.
you're the big voice in the room. You pressured him to come in. Now he comes in, gets hurt. Are you going to take care of him? No, you're not. So shut
Yep.
up. Let him handle his money. And that's kind of how I feel with the Rodgers thing. Again, if he's joking, it's like just leave that alone. Just stick
Hmm.
with the standard. When he gets here, we're gonna be very excited. Can't wait to play. Can't wait to
Yeah.
be on stage. Can't wait to share a locker room. Whatever. I think once you start wading into the waters of other guys' business dealings publicly, to me, that's a no-go. There may be some exceptions, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But it made me laugh. But then I was like, you know what, man, and he probably doesn't know Hassan Reddick that well. They've never been on the same team, and they sure as hell haven't met as Jets. So I'm
Right.
like, that's a guy you don't really know when you're talking about his money situation.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say because I would never want to assume something that Rogers is trying to, get across in his wording, but he never like says anything that's not with a purpose, if that makes sense. Like everything he says, he knows what he's saying, why he's saying it,
Right.
and it almost felt like he was saying it like tongue in cheek to maybe, create a stir because that's just what maybe Jets Twitter was, that was the big thing with a lot of people like, Jets content creators was, oh, this just sounds like Hassan who's upset. But I don't know. It's tough for me to just assume one way or the other. I don't really love that he is kind of putting that out there because what if Hassan eventually does come in and then it's awkward between them and whatever. I will say though that a couple weeks ago he did speak to media, Rogers, and he mentioned that we're all supportive of him in his pursuit of getting what he thinks he's valued at or something
Right.
along those lines. Like we support him going to get his money. So I like that from that aspect. So maybe the joke was supposed to be more lighthearted than it came across, but it is weird to say former agent. Well, maybe, possibly,
Yeah.
we don't know, like that's like a little weird. So for Rogers to say I thought it was going to create headlines and somebody today was going to ask him for sure. It didn't happen, but
Yeah,
I
the real
certainly would have been.
CB3 just commented. Sorry, Dylan, to cut you
No,
off,
you're
but to
good.
straighten this out because I saw this. Reddick's jersey just became available on Fanatics for the first time. However, I saw that on JetNation.com, and I think soon thereafter it was pulled down. So I don't know if somebody messed up and dropped the ball. If somebody was like, let's try to unload some of these things before we trade, like whatever happens. Because that I raised an eyebrow too. I was on the forums. I saw someone comment and say, and I'm assuming, oh, you know what? Let's give credit where it's due. It was a tweet from David Wyatt. That's where it came from. So I don't know. Listen, I don't know if he's checking every day, but David Wyatt did tweet out that today is the first day that Reddick's jersey has been available on Fanatics. And then someone on Jet Nation said very soon thereafter it was removed. So it is not on Fanatics. What else we got in the chat real quick? Charles, how we doing? Let's see. What does he want to know? Mosley and Morgan Moses. Yeah, it sounds like CJ Mosley isn't going to be playing.
Rodgers did say that he expected him to be back. I know obviously he's not the doctor or whatever, but he made it sound like CJ was going to, give it his all again. Maybe they might take it up to game time again with him, but it did sound like Rodgers was optimistic that, and that probably means that Mosley's just itching to get back. He's a warrior. He's going to fight. And I guess that brings up Jamie Sherwood, but yeah, it did seem like they were going to have him, but I guess we'll see now.
Yeah. Wild Wave says if Rodgers keeps playing great, he can say whatever he wants, which I get the sentiment, Wild Wave.
To a degree.
You keep doing what he did last week, and yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and
he could push the head coach and say some profanities that Dolphins fans keep pushing in my mentions that Saleh and Rodgers hate each other somehow.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw. Excuse me, I haven't watched it yet. I just saw a couple seconds of one Jets drive, and there was a clip of Rodgers walking into the locker room, and Saleh was there to greet him and gave each other a big hug. So,
that's funny.
I mean, listen, let's not lie. That looked awkward as hell. When I was like, I honestly, I didn't see the beginning of it. I just looked up and I saw Rodgers glancing at him walking away. I was like, whoa, like what did I miss?
So they cut what we saw on the internet. There's like 3 or 4 seconds before that even. And Rodgers alludes to that on Pat McAfee. And he's like, no, of course they wouldn't, clip the video specifically to show that part. But I guess something happened when they were further apart and Rodgers was still walking toward him.
I did see
definitely
that,
looked like they were happy.
Yeah.
And then the whole interaction happened, which is like, which in today's world is kind of like when you go for a handshake and somebody goes for a pound and then you do this. And that's basically what happened there.
Exactly.
And it's like that awkwardness, but the lip reading stuff, it's like, come on, you're trying to poke a hole and drive a wedge. And of course it was driven by Warren Sharp on Twitter, who never says anything nice about the Jets unless it's about their defense or somebody other than Aaron Rodgers, quite frankly. So it's just silly stuff that I felt like was a nothing burger that was supposed to distract you from the Jets being dominant.
Yeah, and Rich says, how much do we miss JFM? This would not be an issue. I said the other day that if Denver had lost this past weekend, which they didn't, so it's a moot point. But I said if Denver lost and then lost to the Jets, to just go ahead and leave JFM behind. Get on the plane. We'll throw you a day 3 pick and take him back because they really could use him, especially with this Reddick disaster. It'd be weird because his dead money cap hit would be more than his salary because the dead money doesn't go away.
Weird.
He's got like a $9 million dead cap hit, and his salary is not very much. Another note, I don't know if you saw this or heard this, Dylan. Rich Cimini said on his show that he's been told by somebody that Hassan Reddick at this point would be open to a return to Philly if he were to go back to the Eagles because he's from that area. Now, my initial reaction is, well, they traded you. They didn't want to pay you last time. Like, why are they going to want to pay you now? But when they weren't paying him, they thought they had a replacement, which they apparently don't. And Reddick is already losing a ton of money. So, like, on the one hand, I'm like, well, he's not going to take a pay cut. Like, well, he kind of already is taking a pay cut. So he may as well take a pay cut and go play somewhere he wants to play. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. But people have joked about it. I've joked about it. Trade Reddick for Huff. Wouldn't that be funny? It'd be super weird. But and again, I'm not saying it will happen. But for those, because like I said, that was my initial thought. I hear Rich Cimini say Reddick would be open to going back there. I'm like, yeah, they just traded him. But what were the circumstances when he was traded? They thought they had his replacement, and he wanted X amount of dollars. Now
just
they're
like
like,
JFM with us.
Yeah, if they're now like, you know what, we don't have his replacement, And so if he's willing to take less dollars, let's get him back. So again, not saying it'll happen, but I don't think it's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a world where Hassan Reddick says to the Jets, I'm willing to play for the Philadelphia Eagles this year, and then, him and the Eagles agree that whatever happens with his contract, he'll play this year for the Eagles. Why not? Why not? They're not getting shit out of Bryce Huff right now. And I get it though. Financials would be weird and you'd have to make it all work, but
yeah, because the Eagles paid Huff $17 million.
Yeah. And I don't know.
And I know
the cap hits and stuff are different and whatnot, but you could always just restructure. I feel like that's always the thing in the NFL. You could always just. Sorry, what was that?
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that the cap hit. I looked it on over the cap for Huff is nil. It's $3 million hit.
Yeah, only year 3, I think it balloons up to $11 million, and that's the highest cap hit he has in his whole contract. So the Eagles did some really, good finessing of that contract, and I don't know if the Jets would, do the same or restructure or whatever. But I'm not saying no as Joe Douglas in that trade. Obviously, I think Howie Roseman would probably be the person to say no because he's taking on way more risk unless Hassan Reddick gives a blood oath to the Eagles front office that he actually will show up and play, because you could obviously do what he did here and just say, oh, I'll play and then not play. But I don't know. At some point, Hassan Reddick needs to play some goddamn football and get his value back to where he thinks it is, because if it's not for the Jets and they can offload him, why not? I know Samini alluded that it could potentially, be a bargaining chip to get them Devontae Adams in the long run. And I think that's a far-fetched idea, but if you could even trade him for something that you're going to get this season, why not?
Yeah, and the thing what I need, Dylan, I think what we all need, and if you've seen it and I've missed it, by all means enlighten me, but I haven't heard anyone sit down and say, here's when Hassan Reddick has to be in the building to hit free agency, because I've been saying for weeks, and I saw this today. Again, this is why people need to be on the message boards of Jet Nation. Someone luckily, because I Googled it weeks ago and Googled how many games does a player have to get credit for a season, because he needs credit for this year to hit free agency.
Yes.
And I found a couple of articles and they all said has to be active for at least 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, all right.
That's what I thought.
Right. However, what someone posted that exact article today on Jet Nation, what I had missed, because sometimes they bring up the highlighted piece, and I read the paragraph. I didn't read above the paragraph. I didn't scroll up high enough where it said that applies to players with less than 3 years of service. So that doesn't apply to Reddick.
No.
Now, when I did Play Like a Jet with Scott Mason, he was talking about how he spoke to a former agent who said there is nothing in writing that says when you have to come in to get credit for a year. And some people seem to think, again, this is why I need a hard-hitting sports journalist who does their homework, who can get access to these people behind the scenes, NFLPA and agents and things like that. But there are some who seem to think all he's got to do is show up for one game. Jeez. Again, I don't know if that's true. To me, that's speculation, because I can't find anything anywhere that definitively says this is what has to happen in order for a player to get credit for the season and hit free agency. Now, there was a case years ago, I think it was Joey Galloway. I forget who it was. There was a player who held out for a season, and then it went to an arbiter, and they decided, is this person a free agent or not? But that was 20 years ago, so I would think they would have fixed it now and put it in the rule book. Yeah. But I can't find anything. So anyone who can find something, feel free to share. And I'm surprised. All I keep hearing is if he doesn't play this year, the Jets have his rights next year.
Yes.
Okay, but what if he does? What if the Jets make the playoffs and he waits till then and he shows up, for the first playoff game and says he's, oh, I can't go. I hurt my whatever. I want an answer, Dylan. Nobody knows. But here's a good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, much like high school, I didn't do my homework on this one either. But if that is the case and he can only play one game and get credit, the Jets need to do everything they can to get rid of this guy so that they could use that money elsewhere, because you have $14 million just kind of held up, hoping that he comes back. And I know, obviously, the longer he holds out, the less they actually have to pay him. But that money still has to sit there as his cap space hit or whatever until he shows up or does whatever. And I don't know, maybe regular season does work differently than postseason. So like if he shows up just for the postseason, there's like a way that, we get him for the postseason, but he's still a free agent. I don't know. I feel like I would even accept that if the Jets made it to the playoffs and without Hassan Reddick, and then all of a sudden he said, you know what, I'm ready to go and I want to play in the playoffs. And we knew that he was not going to be, returning on his contract to the Jets next year. I would probably still accept that because we need the help on D-line. We'll probably still need the help in January. So I don't know. I feel like it's just a weird situation that if it isn't in writing, he's probably trying to find every single loophole he can to play the littlest amount of football and get the highest amount of dollars.
Yeah, Wild Wave just said, "Oh, Dano, how we doing? Good to see you here." Rich, like I said, as I said to someone earlier today, the only way you're trading him is if a team loses an edge rusher and they feel like that's the difference between them competing and being desperate, or Reddick dramatically reducing his asking price. Because when the Eagles tried to trade him, everyone except the Jets hung up the phone when they were told how much money he wanted. So unless a team has changed their mind, Wild Wave, you're saying what I had been saying for weeks. He's got to have 6 games to qualify for free agency. I looked that up, and at least what I found says that only applies to players with less than 3 years of service. So that would not apply to Reddick. I'm not saying it's not right. I'm saying I've not found it in writing. And listen, maybe the thing I found didn't say 3 years because it does apply to everyone now. I don't know. There's a few different pieces of information out there, but none of them are sort of up to date and specific enough for me, a layperson, to sift through it and figure that out. So that was my thought.
Too much gray area here, and it's very confusing.
Yeah, and I did see that. And the Raiders, I think, lost an edge guy, right? So Wild Wave is saying the Lions lost Davenport.
And then the Ravens, I think, picked up Ngakoue. So that's another guy off the board.
I had hoped the Jets would grab him when JJ went down. At least just bring him in for a workout and see how he looks. Yep. I liked Ngakoue for a long time. I wanted him to be a Jet several times. But yeah, and that's what it'll take, Wild Wave. It's going to take an injury and somebody saying, look, we're a really good. By the way, I saw Hutchinson today. He's got 7 sacks.
Yeah, some have him listed, I think, at 6.5. But hey, there's only one.
Whatever it is.
Do you know who the next person is?
Will McDonald.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
Absolutely. So matchups, Dylan, this week, Jets, Broncos. What are some of your key matchups?
Well, we talked about it a little bit before, but I'll go a little bit more in depth. I think the tackles versus their edge group, their D-line group in general, is going to be a big match for the Jets. Olu obviously coming in as a rookie. You're facing 2 players on the top 15 in terms of pass rush win rate or pressure rate, Zach Allen and Jonathan Cooper. So if those guys are out on the edge against Olu, like somebody said in the comments earlier, I think it was Rich, you got to probably put a chip on with Conklin.
Or Ruckert, somebody.
I was going to say, I'm not even putting Ruckert in that conversation because after that all-22, his blocking was rough, like real bad in this game. And like Conklin, he puts his face in the fan. He'll dog out an end man on the line of scrimmage, but
I thought Ruckert was really good the previous week. This week, I didn't notice him as much.
Against Tennessee, he was good. And I didn't notice this. This is something that, I try not to do with when I watch film is I watch it for myself, and then I watch other people's breakdowns of the film if they're out there. So JT O'Sullivan did the Aaron Rodgers breakdown. And after I got done watching the offense and charting it like I do, I went back and watched his, and he pointed out Ruckert in like the first quarter. He pointed out a Ruckert bad block. And he's like, 89 with a bad block. It's the backup tight end. And progressively throughout the game, he kept pointing it out to the point where he even said, he was like, damn, now it's to the point where all I'm doing is watching if 89 can make the block. And a lot of times he was getting blown off the ball. He was getting stacked.
Very unlike him, though, isn't it?
He was getting stacked and shed. And like, maybe the Patriots are just more physical up front. And he was, playing a little lax or what have you, but it made me nervous. So I hope that they do chip with the tight ends. Maybe they even get Bates more involved because they were running a lot of 12 and 13 personnel in that game. But Olu and Tyron Smith versus Zach Allen and Jonathan Cooper is my number one matchup because Tyron hasn't been perfect either. I was going to come on and say he's probably been our worst offensive lineman of the 5. And that's not
feels weird to say it, but he has.
And that's not to say he's been awful, but
Right.
that's to say it's below expectation, and maybe, Father Time is undefeated.
Mm-hmm. That was actually my number one as well. I singled out Cooper. I said Cooper
Mhm.
against Olu. I think that's because I looked at his snap counts at where he
Where he
plays, and
lines up.
where he lines up, and he'll probably line up against Olu a little bit more than the other guys. So that's my number one as well.
Mhm.
For my number two, I went with the other side, or the inverse, Will McDonald against McGlickney. I think Will McDonald's on fire right now. He's
I don't
playing
even
really
think
good
he's playing.
football.
I think it's their backup. I'm sorry, but I think it's their backup to McGlinchey. I think he's not
Oh,
even
I didn't
playing.
see him. I looked at the injury report. I didn't see him on there. I must have
Yeah,
missed it.
yeah. Maybe I have wrong information, but I saw somebody tweet that both teams were playing backup tackles.
Okay. Is it? Oh, but could it be the other? Could it be Bowles?
Alex Polchewski is their right tackle right now. Did they put what's his
Okay.
name on IR? Did they put him on an injured list? McGlinchey just went to IR. That's
Oh,
why they
okay.
didn't have him on the injury report. Okay,
Well, that's
so
even bigger now.
yeah, so it's
McDonald against the guy you just said.
Alex Polchewski. Yep, he was looks like a street free agent in 2023.
Okay.
Nothing about him on Arrowheads that shows anything of note. So that's a huge matchup because McDonald, like we said, second in sacks. I like that matchup a lot. I think McDonald could win. They're getting a little cheeky with their defensive line arrangements, and I like that. Putting Quinnen on the outside too, that's going to help. Like I said, they had McDonald in the 4-eye against New England a couple times, so they're getting different with their looks, and I think the right side is definitely where they can take advantage. I know Quinn Miners has been pretty good as well on the right as a right guard. Not too familiar with Luke Wattenberg's game, their center, but I feel like that's not their original starter. I feel like they had a guy get hurt. Do
Yeah,
you
I
know
think
if that's true or not? Because I
I'm,
feel like
I'm
they lost Cushionberry in free agency. That's what it
right.
is. So maybe this
Did
guy
he go
is
to
their.
Tennessee? I think, or did he start out in Tennessee?
I think he started in Tennessee, went to Denver. Now
For some
he's
reason, I have Cushionberry in Tennessee in my head.
yeah. Now I can't picture it either, but yeah, I think this is an offensive line that we should be not licking our chops for, but could definitely have a lot of success against, especially early on if they do the blitzing like they did.
All right.
All right. My number two matchup. And I guess it's not really like a matchup per se, but I think it's kind of like a cool storyline at the same time. But I think it's an important phase of this game, and that's special teams, and it's Mike Westhoff versus Brant Boyer. Kind of
Yeah.
mentor versus mentee a
Yep.
little bit. We had
Yep.
Westhoff on the pod a couple years ago, and he talked about it and how Brant Boyer came up under him because we loved what Brant Boyer was doing a couple years ago. I feel like he's been the consistent driving force with the Jets coaching staff. So it'll be cool to see what happens. I think that maybe this is the game where we bust out something cool and we get that big return that we've been looking for, or I don't know. Our special teams unit is ranked, I think, second, and theirs is ranked in the low 20s. So it's a very big mismatch. But I feel like it's one of those things where Westhoff's probably going to want to, get cued against his former team as well. We played them last year, and I don't remember if he did anything of note. But with these new kickoff rules, I feel like I've already seen, Westhoff try to implement new things. So just an underlying storyline that I think is cool, but one that is important because special teams is probably going to play a big part in this game.
Yeah, another one. I think the third one, because you're going to want to see people be able to get up the middle, get in Bo Nix's face, rattle him a little bit, and of course you've got Quinnen in the middle. Kinlaw, I thought, played well last week. I think he's been better the last couple of weeks compared to week one. So Ben Powers in the middle for them. I thought he looked really good last week. But then I didn't watch the Pittsburgh game. Like I said, I did watch the Tampa game, or about 90% of it. And I went and looked at his grades against Pittsburgh, the PFF grades, and they had him as having a horrible game the previous week. But that Pittsburgh defense is kind of a different monster right now, so that's really tough to say. But as far as how he played against Tampa, I thought he looked really good, and I thought he's a guy who can pose a good challenge for those DTs in the middle, and they got to be able to You got to be able to pressure Nix, get him rattled. He's a young kid. Like I said, that's why I'm interested in seeing whether or not they blitz him early or blitz him often like they did last week.
Yeah, that would be my expectation, is if they happen to similar game script as the Patriots, if it's like 3rd and 6 plus on that first drive, I really feel like they're going to try to, at least load the box and show a simulated pressure. Whether they pull out the blitz or they actually do it or not, I'm not sure. But I feel like that's got to be the mindset, is like, let's continue doing what we're doing from this mixing it up type of defense, instead of they know we're going to rush with 4. It makes it easier for the quarterback to process things. And let's just hope that we can beat them on the back end. And we can probably beat them in the coverage aspect. But if there's even a slight lapse, I'm not saying Bo Nix will take advantage of us, but it's not the type of game where you even want to leave it up to chance that could happen. Because I expect their defense to give us fits on offense. And I'm not saying we're going to score 1 touchdown and a field goal if we're lucky. I still think we can put points up, but I feel like we're going to have to come on defense and really show up in a way that was more reminiscent to the Patriots than it was even the second half of the Titans game.
Yeah, it's going to be I don't think it's going to be in the next 2 weeks. I don't think they're going to be games that are going to play out the way we thought they might. I thought they could kind of embarrass Denver a little bit. I did my third one, Powers against the DTs.
Yeah. My third one, it's not a direct matchup, but I am going to be watching each team's cornerback ones, Sauce and Surtain. I feel like those are 1 and 2 on everybody's lists respectively. Sometimes Sauce gets a little hate and he's like 3rd or 4th or 5th on the list, but Surtain is always up there too. And he's going to shadow Garrett. They're going to, every team has been trying to take away Garrett, and I expect him to fully, do that, even if Garrett's in the slot. He's that type of player that'll go into the slot as well. And then on the opposite side, obviously, I think Sauce is probably going to lock down Courtland Sutton. He's probably not going to shadow in this game if I had to guess. Their other corners, Josh Reynolds. And then they also have little Jordan Humphrey. I thought he was a tight end when I was watching them, because they kept him like real close to the line of scrimmage in almost like a pseudo 12 personnel with another tight end in him, or like a fullback in him in 21 type situation. So they have 3 taller wide receivers. Not saying that they don't have speed, but I feel like Sauce doesn't need to, necessarily spy or not spy, but like shadow a specific guy in this matchup. I don't want to see another Courtland Sutton frame by frame, though, of the end of the game DPIs and all that bullshit, because I can't sit through another one of these. I feel like the Broncos are becoming like a small rival for the Jets.
And wasn't that the one? There was one that kept going, that Sauce's haters kept sending out, and the receiver grabbed him first. I can't remember if that was
that's the one. That's the one, with Courtland going into the end zone. And it's like they were hand fighting at the end of the game. The refs are going to do that. But
it's incredible how few people know the pass interference rules. Like you can put hands on a guy. You can't disrupt his route. You can't.
Right.
You grab a dude and stop him from going where he wants to go. Right. That's PI. If you're feeling for him and just tapping him, tap a shoulder or whatever, he's still there. That's legal. You can't impede the route. If you don't impede the route, it's not PI. Yep. And I see all the look, he touched him there. He touched his hand. Yeah, he can touch his hand, but he didn't grab his hand. So
you can hand fight a little bit. You can't wrap or
and depending on if it's back and forth, they'll let it go. It all depends.
Especially at the end of the game, they're not going to
the score. They don't care.
Yeah, refs don't want to throw the flag in those situations unless it's like blatantly obvious. And if there's even a little bit of back and forth, they're going to just let these guys play. They're professionals.
Yep. So what do you got for a score, Dylan?
All right. So my score prediction, and like I said, I don't think it's going to be like an absolute dragging. I feel like there are some things where we're going to have to play really right on offense, and then we have the upper hand on defense, but that's not to say we can just sit back and let it come to us. I want to say, this is tough because I don't want to make the margin too big. I know we're like 7.5 or 8.5 point favorites, so I'm going to say 23-10. I think 23-10 is safe, as a little bit further of a margin that I put against the Patriots. 10 points, 13 points, I feel like is comfortable for me with this team, and hopefully we make Bo Nix look like a rookie. I think that's the goal.
I'm going to say 24-9. I was going to go.
I like that.
I was gonna go higher, but I think Garrett Wilson. I think his breakout game is coming, but I don't know that it's this Sunday.
No, it's tough to
Tough
say it's this
matchup.
one.
Yeah, tough
Yep.
matchup. So he'll get some catches. But I don't think this is going to be his. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he puts up 150 yards.
Yeah, I
But
think
I'm looking
London Garrett will be the one.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice. I'm looking forward to his breakout game because it's in the next, I say, 2 to 3 weeks he's going to blow up.
Yeah.
And it's going
Which
to
is
be fun.
crazy because he's still on pace for like 90 catches, 860 yards, and 6 touchdowns, according to Connor Hughes. So it's a down year, obviously, but still like on pace to be, above average at worst.
Yeah, I may have to back off my prediction of breaking all the Jets records, but I'm not yet. I'm not. Listen,
Yeah.
he could
It's
go on
up
a
there.
tear and have a few 150 pluses in 3 out of 4 weeks or something like that. So I'm not ready to back off just yet. Any thoughts from around the league, Dylan? I only had 2. First one, this Dolphins quarterback situation, and I tweeted this, and I'm sure I talked about it. I don't care. I'm going to talk about it again. I don't know how the Dolphins, with a legitimate, I'm not being facetious, like a legitimate offensive genius at head coach, how they end up with this batch of quarterbacks on their roster. I mean, Skylar Thompson is terrible.
Yeah.
We all know the other guy. What's his name? Pick 6 guy. Fail Mary.
Tim Boyle laser show.
They're so. I watched them and I'm like, this
and
is
they cut
so
Mike
weird
White
to me. This is so weird. This guy, again, legitimate offensive wizard, has the respect of everybody around the league. Probably viewed as a top 5, if not top 3 offensive mind. And he's got Skylar Thompson on his roster. I don't get how that happens. It's baffling. You would think he would be able to identify and groom a young quarterback who would be somewhat competent and Thompson's not a rookie. He's on year 3 now, at least 3, if not 4. So he's not a rookie.
I think it's a situation where it's almost like Mike LaFleur. He was ready to take the leap. Obviously, McDaniel took the leap to head coach, not offensive coordinator. But I feel like he still, like LaFleur, needed a veteran guy or somebody who was at worst an average guy who could play in his offense. We look at the guys that play in their offenses, Brock Purdy and Tua. Like those are guys that are, middling in terms of physical ability. They don't have the biggest arms. I know Tua has, a slightly bigger arm, but they just play within the timing of the offense and those little things. And I'm not saying Skylar or Tim Boyle or even Mike White couldn't do those things, but it really comes to a glaring head when the coach doesn't have a guy who can operate in their system. Dolphins fans are calling for Mike McDaniel's job. I think it's absolutely hilarious because I would want to keep Mike McDaniel despite not having the developmental history of a quarterback, and you just hope that you can get a veteran guy in there. But I do think it is strange how somebody is propped up to be, the next best thing, and they're not always the next best thing. They're good or they're great, but they're not the next best thing. And there's a reason why the Andy Reids of the world are looked at a little differently. Not saying he develops quarterbacks, but he does, obviously. I believe he developed McNabb and Mahomes to an extent, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And I feel like McDaniel is one of those coaches that would be highly, sought after if he was fired. But the Dolphins are not going to be good with anybody they got, even Snoop Huntley. I don't care how much Tyreek Hill likes Snoop Huntley in this press conference today.
That's why they got to go with Zach Wilson.
That's the savior. And now I hope that Jets fans will be all in Dolphins fans' mentions saying how great Zach is and how you'll love him.
Yep.
And he runs the offense perfectly in preseason against your 4th string defense. But I think that's interesting. We talked about it last week. It leaves the door wide open in the division and the conference, obviously. And that was going to bring me to my next point, which is, do you know how many teams in the AFC have a winning record right now?
Not many.
Without thinking about it, or I guess without looking or really stewing on it.
I would guess 5, 6.
6. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
a
us,
low
the Bills, the Steelers, the Texans, the Chargers, and the Chiefs. So exactly how everybody
start the
thought
playoff
after
today.
3 weeks.
Let's
Yeah,
just start
exactly.
the playoffs now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think enough.
Yeah, and I'd be cool with it as a wild card because Buffalo, I feel like they're well deserving of their 3-0, and we're deserving of our 2-1. But I think 2-1 is nothing to be mad at through 3
Jets
games.
got to win their next 2, and that matchup against Buffalo will be a monster game.
Oh, but, if we could be 4-1 going into that game, regardless of whatever their record is, that would be game of the week leading up to for sure.
Yeah, that's a bigger if than I thought it would be because Minnesota, man, that defense and Darnold.
Yeah, I don't want to overlook
you don't know how teams are going to respond flying, going west to east.
Mm-hmm. I never want to overlook Minnesota right now because they're playing some of the craziest defense under Flores, and that makes me nervous. And I feel like that's the difference between this year and last year. Not necessarily looking ahead on the schedule, but Zach Rosenblatt alluded to this on his press conference or in his podcast that 2 years ago when they beat the Packers in Green Bay, the team treated it like they just won the Super Bowl, and it showed for the rest of the season. This year, Zach said that that's probably the vibes right now are about as high as they were coming out of that game, except now the vibes are like, we're not gonna, rest on our laurels. We're gonna not get too high on the highs, like all the stuff Rodgers has been preaching. And I think that's really important that you have a guy who can rein everybody in, calm everybody down, and that's what's gonna sustain your success throughout the season and get you on a 3-game win streak as opposed to dropping 2 of your next 3
avoid those letdowns.
Yeah, the next 3 teams after this game are undefeated opponents currently today. That's not at all what we thought the schedule was going to look like back in April or even August. So we really have to look at this as a 1 game at a time type of deal. And I know fans can do whatever they want. They can get ahead of themselves, and we always do it. And we look ahead, and those are the types of games that normally we would drop. Now we
can do that. We don't have practice this week.
Yeah, we can. They can. And I think that's
I always laugh when people tell me that. Don't look ahead. I'm like, I'm not preparing to play this week. I can look ahead 10 years if I want to.
Yeah.
Oh, they got to play the Dolphins. Yeah, they got to play them. I don't. I can look at front. I can look 10 years ahead, 20 years back. I'm not. I have nowhere to be this week. I'm going to look at whatever I want. But real quick, the other thing I wanted to touch on. Watched Seattle this week, and I'll tell you what, as much as we love that Jets backfield, that when they get Walker back, who's been hurt,
Walker Charbonnet,
and Charbonnet, I don't know if you remember that. I was a big Charbonnet guy.
Yes, you were.
He has not let down, disappointed at all. Zach Charbonnet is an absolute beast, and I'd watch Walker in week 1. I think he's been out since then. Yeah. I watched him in week 1. He looked fantastic. I think he's going to have a monster year.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes down, and I watched Charbonnet the other day, and I was like, tell you what,
they picked back up where they were.
My Jets fan bias is like, oh, Brees and Allen, that's the best. Nobody's got a combo like that. And then I watched Seattle, and I was like, oh, somebody's got a combo like that. Like, these dudes are good. So if you haven't seen them and you're unfamiliar and you just like some good football, when you're not watching the Jets, check out that Seattle offense, man. Those running backs are damn good.
Yeah, certainly. My last point that I had to bring up, and I've seen it too much on Twitter. Do Jets fans have, I guess not the right, but should they be taking a victory lap on Twitter because Trevor Lawrence is not that good, and we were saved by actually drafting Zach Wilson? Because that led us to Aaron Rodgers? Or am I just in the small group of people that think that that's just so absurd to play the what if game that hard that Zach Wilson ended up being the better pick because it got us Aaron Rodgers instead of having to pay 50-something million to Trevor Lawrence? I don't know. I feel like that's not the victory lap we should be taking. And yes, Trevor Lawrence is bad, and the Jaguars look bad losing 10 in a row, and Doug Peterson's probably going to be the first coach to be fired in the NFL at this rate. But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think that's the victory lap, and I didn't like Zach at all. You know that.
I don't. Yeah, but I don't. I mean, I see the logic in it. Like, basically, where would you rather be right now? Would you rather have Aaron, or would you? And the thing is, you can say the Jaguars ruined Trevor Lawrence, like the Jets wouldn't have. You know, like
it's
the
hard to
Jets
say
have this
what version
long-standing
we'd have
history
of Trevor.
yeah, like he'd probably be worse now than he probably wouldn't have been worth re-signing. He probably would have been gone with Zach, and we'd be
He'd
right
be
where
on a
we are
different
anyway.
team.
If we're being honest,
Yeah.
that's just kind of what the Jets do. But yeah, I mean,
Although, could you imagine Trevor Lawrence and Mike LaFleur for just a second?
listen,
It'd have been cool. It might have had
yeah,
its flashes.
yeah, I definitely not something I'd be doing the victory laps over because it's because
No.
I did see some of that on Twitter, but then I
Yeah,
had
like
that thought. I
posting
was
the
like,
Braden Mann tackle against the Rams and like thanking him again. And it's like,
yeah, I
no,
was
we
like,
can't be
if the
doing
Jets
this.
drafted Lawrence, he probably would have been bad or worse than what he is, maybe not re-signed. So either way,
Or this
um,
team could have been really freaking good around a rookie contract quarterback
yeah,
and did what they wanted to do with Zach Wilson. There's just too many what ifs for me to say it's a
yeah.
victory lap worthy take.
I
But
mean,
Trevor
listen,
Lawrence playing bad, Jags playing very bad, and things
we
need to go better there.
yeah, we don't have a lot to be happy about. I guess I would understand that more if the Jets stunk right now. Like I got more important things to worry about. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
the Jets were sitting there at 1-2 or 0-3 and doing their normal averaging 6 points a game, you could say, well, at least we're not tied to a $55 million quarterback who wasn't very good. Like I
Yeah,
could
it
see that.
felt like that's exactly it. It felt like an article somebody would write when the team is like 2-11, out of the playoffs
Mhm.
by Halloween again, and they're
Right.
just really trying to fetch for content. That's what it really felt like. And I'm like, I don't know. It didn't sit right with me. And I'm not even this not even a defensive Zach or anything of Zach, but it's just like it's not what I thought we should be doing.
No, yeah, I saw a couple of those and I was like, really? I don't care. He would have stunk here,
Yeah.
just like everybody does. Um, but look, we're both picking them to win this week. It's a game they should win, and you're right. And we've talked about Rodgers' leadership, and this is what they need. Like, don't get too high after these wins. Stay focused. Don't have the letdowns. I'm sure you've seen it by now. I've seen Rodgers talk a couple times about Mike McCarthy and that the important lesson of
The
our
biggest
biggest
struggle is handling
yeah
success.
yeah, that's going to be our biggest obstacle this year is our success and not getting too high and complacent. So Rodgers, listen, man, that was the thing I did after he shot Salah that look, and I was like, what the hell's going on here? I thought, you know what, that could just be him being super competitive and saying like, we still got work to do. Like, let's not celebrate.
Job's not
And,
done.
and I feel like that's his mentality this year. I feel like he's thinking I've probably got 1 or 2 years left, and I want to get another damn ring. So let's treat every game, every situation like it matters because it does.
And that
So
brings me to a little point I saw on Instagram on one of the Jets posts. Somebody commented and said, Alan Lazard's going clubbing after this win or something like that in the comments. And Lazard commented on it and said, probably not, job's not finished, with a salute emoji. And I'm like, see, that's the little attitude adjustment change that Rodgers is bringing that people weren't going to get with Zach Wilson. He's not going to be able to rally the troops. So I think that's the little subtle differences in this team from a morale perspective that's going to keep them going, like you said, highs and through the lows and everything. So
yeah, and it's I don't know about you, Dylan. I mean, Rodgers has been here for we talked about when he first took snaps and when you see him in the uniform and you can't believe he's a Jet, but now he's been here and we've seen him play a few games. But the clip I mentioned earlier was like a 30-second clip or whatever from one Jets drive. And watching him walk through the locker room with that uniform on, I had that moment again. I'm like, that dude is the Jets quarterback.
yeah,
Like I can't, like, I thought I was used to it and I'm not used to it. I guess because I've not seen him in that environment right after a win, celebrating with his guys, laughing it up in the locker room. And it took me back to that feeling of, I cannot believe Aaron Rodgers is the Jets quarterback. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
It's a surreal feeling, and I've noticed that each of the beginnings of the 3 games that we've had, I start getting this like shaky anxiety feeling when he steps on the field. Because obviously I don't want him to get hurt, and I'm not like
Right.
scared that he will, but that's always the fear the second I see him run out on the field. Like, oh my God, if he gets hurt, our season's done. But like, that's what it feels like to have a quarterback, and I love it.
I was gonna say that's. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I have a stat that I want to end the show with. So you keep going with your
Oh
point.
no, I was just gonna say that is the case for most teams. If you lose your quarterback,
Yes.
you're done. But for us, it's been so damn long since we've had a quarterback that
Yep.
it's like can we put him in glass and just you don't want to listen, play the game, do what you're gonna do, and guys get hurt, but you just I cringe when he runs. I cringe when every time he gets sacked. I'm like, and you're like, he's 40, even without last year's injury, he's still 40, so anything can happen. But hopefully what happens this week is a couple more touchdown passes and another win. What's the stat for us, Dylan?
Yep. So I posted this on my Twitter via my play charting. I go back and I chart the offensive plays. So I hope the people on YouTube can see the tweet that I just pulled up. But through 3 games, the Jets have run 182 total offensive plays. That includes penalties, everything alike, kneel downs, spikes, throwaways. 11 and 12 personnel are their predominant 2 personnel packages. 11, obviously, 1 running back, 1 tight end, so 3 wide receivers. And then 12 is 1 running back, 2 tight ends, so 2 wide receivers. Out of the 182 plays, the Jets ran 11 personnel, 110 of them. So that's 60.4%. And they ran 12 personnel 52 times, which is 28.5%. So I went back and I looked at sharpfootballstats.com, which is a stat collecting site that's no longer, but it stopped in 2021, or 2022. So I have the data from Rodgers' back-to-back MVP seasons. And lo and behold, in 2021, the Aaron Rodgers-led Packers ran 11 personnel, 61%, and 12 personnel at 29%. So the Jets are a half a percentage point away from just that personnel grouping usage throughout their first 3 games. And I'm not saying that that's going to bring Aaron Rodgers to MVP form, but it shows me that they're doing the little things that they did in Green Bay with him and Hackett. I know it was a Matt LaFleur system as well, but they're doing those plays, those systems, those personnel groupings that got Aaron to where he was at MVP level. And if we keep seeing what we saw against New England, quick decisions, really quick passes, 12 of 13 to start football games, 13 of 15 to start football games, 1 turnover-worthy play through 3 games, he could win MVP. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception ratio. Like, this guy is on track. So those are the little happy little thoughts that I get when I'm watching this offense back. That's like, damn, we have a chance to replicate what they did in Green Bay with better weapons, quite frankly. So it made me very optimistic about the direction of this offense, despite not seeing its true ceiling yet.
Yep. And listen, when he and Garrett Wilson do get on the same page, and if Joe Douglas were to make a trade, I know we've talked about Devontae, but just bring in another weapon. I mean, you'd love it to be Devontae, but load up, get some more depth. And I mean, Ruckert, I think we've talked, he's got to start making some plays. I know he had 2 catches last week. That's nice. But something a little more than that. But it's a start because he hadn't done really much of anything before that. Anyway, that'll wrap this one up. We both like the Jets to win this week, to beat rookie quarterback Bo Nix at home at MetLife. If you're able to, man, I'm always jealous that I can't go. But it stings a little less when they stink, But when they're good, it's like, oh, man.
That FOMO comes back.
Man, do I miss having season tickets, Man, do I miss tailgating out, at MetLife. And I get jealous of anyone who's physically able to go to games. If you can go. Because damn it, I wish I could. That'll wrap this one up. Jets hopefully headed to 3-1 before heading out to London. We'll see you throughout the week and again next Thursday night. Have a good one, Jets fans.